If anybody would prefer not to have their video showing, we're going to be recording this launch event so that others can listen later on. And if you can hear the crows in the background, I think they're calling out to Mother Earth, indicating their displeasure with the state of the Barka-Darling River. But while we continue to let people in, I'd like to acknowledge country. My name is Michelle Maloney. I'm a descendant of the settler or the colonial peoples, the English, the Irish. I live here in beautiful North Brisbane, the lands of the Yuggera peoples, the Turrbal Yuggera peoples across Brisbane, and the Turrbal peoples in particular here in North Brisbane. I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and I acknowledge the role of colonisation, its past horrors and its ongoing terrible situation for First Nations peoples. But the work that I do, every breath in my body, I like to think that we're working in solidarity with First Nations peoples and our own local folks who care about the living world. So tonight, what we'd love to do is there's going to be a number of us just sharing some insights and giving an overview of the report that we have been, we worked on for so long, and it was very, very complex and difficult to do, but we're very, very pleased that you can all join us. Tonight I'll give a brief introduction, and then we're going to hear from other co-authors of the report, and also the amazing crew, including Ryan, Jasper and Mark Merritt, who were catalysts for a lot of this work and who joined us on our journey as we traversed the different communities from the south to the north of the Barka-Darling River. I'd also like to acknowledge a special guest. Quentin Grafton is joining us. He's a laureate professor and the convener of the Water Justice Hub at the Australian National University. We're really delighted to have Quentin, someone with his background and the level of work he's been doing on water justice, to provide some initial comments on the report and on the process that we've been doing. So with your permission, I'm going to share screen and just show you the website where you can find the report, show a few photos while I give my brief introduction to what we've been up to and the contents of the report. And then I'll hand over to Quentin to make his comments. And then I'll invite Gil, Gwyn, Manny and Ross to talk about what we saw, what we as the People's Panel saw when we journeyed along these river communities. So if technology is going to be kind to me, and so it is, this is the website, tribunal.org.au, for the Australian People's Tribunal. If anyone's interested in reading the report later, tribunal.org.au is where you will find all the information that we're about to share with you. Please excuse me, that's my very rude dog barking in the background. The Australian People's Tribunal is a permanent civil society entity. This means we are not government and we're also not funded. We are a group of lawyers and First Nations elders and other First Nations peoples who are deeply concerned about ongoing devastation to Australia's living world and our communities of people and non-people people. The tribunal was established by the Australian Earth Laws Alliance. I am the co-founder and the director of AILA, and we act as a secretariat for a burgeoning group of people who are seeking justice for Australia's communities and the living world. You can read more about the origins of the Australian People's Tribunal, or the APT, as we go along. Whenever you want to, as we go along, you can jump in there too and have a look at the website. The origins of the Barka-Darling River report began with the citizens' inquiry that we ran over a one-day hearing in 2018. During that, we had been invited to craft a fairly high-level discussion about the broad-scale impacts of agriculture, industrial-scale agriculture or European-style agriculture across the continent of Australia. Now, I'm just scrolling down. Please forgive me if I make you dizzy. You can visit our website and look at the information about the 2018 tribunal. We had a number of international guests speak about the devastating impacts across the planet of monoculture, of large-scale industrialized agriculture, meaning really big monoculture dependent on fossil fuel and chemicals, increasing nitrates into the system and often causing large-scale devastation to soils as well as vegetation, forests and biodiversity. We had a number of very important First Nations speakers, and to kind of give some, I guess, focus into such a large issue and a large problem, we had 2 case studies. One was the impacts of agriculture in the Brigalow Belt bioregion, and the second case study were the impacts of agriculture and irrigation on the Murray-Darling Basin, with the focus on the Darling River and Menindee Lakes. And we will be forever grateful to Mark Merritt for really bringing to our attention, particularly what was happening to the Menindee Lakes at the time. One of the key findings that we came to through the 2018 inquiry was that what was happening to the Barka, Darling and Menindee Lakes deserved further attention. And I suppose I should say at the beginning, the citizens' inquiries that we run, the Australian People's Tribunal, we are all volunteers. There is no funding, there is no money. Everything we do, we just do because we care and we're passionate, and we open up to anybody to be involved. And the reason I say that is I feel like I personally owe a debt of apology, I suppose, for the delay and the time it took to write this report. But we went out there for 2 weeks in March 2019, and I'm looking forward to Gil and Gwyn and Manny and Ross talking about their own experiences, although Ross didn't join us for the trip, but the experience of processing the information that communities gave us. So the 2019 Citizens Inquiry focused on inviting interested people along 8 towns to share with us some answers to some very simple questions. You know, what is your connection to the river and the river system? What are you seeing happen around you? What would you like to see happen in the future to succeed in building, bringing some of the river system back to life and ensuring that human and non-human communities have a future? So on this page on the website, you can access the full report, which I'll show you in one moment before handing over. You'll also see more than 100 video testimonies from amazing local people who came forward to share their views. Again, some of the other co-authors of our report will share their insights into what they saw and what they heard during our inquiry. The only other thing I wanted to quickly do was show you this beautiful report, beautiful in terms of formatting, horrific in terms of content. I personally would like to say thank you to everybody in the communities who came out and spoke to us. There was even then an absolute exhaustion in inquiries, because the government and others have been running many inquiries over time. We like to think that this report has been done by fellow Australians who love and care for the people and the living world along these river system. We love this place. We are very, very worried about our fellow Australian folks, the First Nations peoples and other folks living out there, and desperately worried about the state of the environment. So there's many beautiful and amazing and disturbing photos in this report, disturbing in terms of, you know, dead animals and things. But what I might do now is stop sharing, and I'd be very happy to hand over to Quentin Grafton to just share some comments as someone who's been working for a very long time in the field of water justice. Thank you so much, Quentin. You're still on mute? Yeah.
Thanks so much, Michelle, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to you all. And so if I were wearing a hat, I'd take my hat off. Simply to thank you all for the effort that you put in to write this report, and to Mark and others who helped, of course, in terms of putting those testimonies out there. They're very, very powerful. So as Michelle introduced me, my name's Quentin. I've been working on the Murray-Darling Basin and water issues for a good number of years now. And I'm talking to you from Ngunnawal Ngambri country, which is the ACT, Australian Capital Territory, and a little bit beyond that. And there's some sacred rivers here as well. So the Molonglo and of course the Murrumbidgee. And I want to recognize the nations, the Ngunnawal Nation and Ngambri Nation. I want to recognize that they never ceded their lands, their country, and these rivers and streams that we enjoy here. And that I also want to acknowledge their elders, their past, present, and emerging. So that acknowledgement, I think, is a beginning that all of us need to start with in the context of understanding justice from an Australian context. And I don't need to tell you, and the authors will give you the details and certain those very powerful testimonies. But you know, Australia was colonized, a country was taken, and that country was not just land, it was also the waters. And if that was just an historical event, that would be bad enough, terrible as it is. But it's not just an historical event. It's happening right now in 2020, of course, in the Barka. But it's not just in the Barka. There are plans afoot, as you were probably aware, but are worth highlighting, for National Water Infrastructure Grid. There was $2 billion, that's $2,000 million allocated additional to the existing funding to build water infrastructure in Australia. And a good part of that will be in the northern part of Australia. So what you've experienced, I'm in the Murray-Darling Basin, of course, as well. What we've experienced here could be coming soon to northern Australia. And it's another example of, if you want to describe it, colonization, but I think that just takes away the notion of what it is. It's a small number of people, often with taxpayers' dollars. So it's your dollars, my dollars. So it's not like they're doing it, you know, with their own dollars. Taxpayers' dollars to support them, to build dams and infrastructure on land that's not theirs, country's not there, and to take water that they shouldn't be extracting without prior and informed consent. So it goes across all sorts of norms, ethics, as well as the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. I mean, so that is just the bigger story that goes beyond the Barka, and it's worth highlighting that this is a struggle that will continue not only for the Barkangee and for all the peoples in the basin, but it's a struggle all of us in Australia are going to have to face. So why was I invited? I'm not sure, but I'm honored to be invited and privileged to be here. I convene a water justice hub that actually began last year, but funding didn't begin until the 1st of July, and we formally launched on the 28th of September. And in that launch, we had a whole range of speakers from different parts of the world, most of them from Australia. We highlighted a number of things. One of them was that the Sustainable Development Goals, which I think are very relevant to the report you have here, they're not going to be delivered on a global scale, and they're not going to be delivered, and I'm going to repeat myself, they're not going to be delivered right here in Australia. Okay, so there are thousands of Australians that don't have access to potable drinking water. Okay, that we would consider to be acceptable. There are an untold number of Australians who have suffered in all sorts of ways in the context of how water is being used. That means we won't deliver on that. And so in the Water Justice Up, we highlight 3 forms of injustice. There are many forms of injustice, of course, but what we are talking about, and it's nothing original to us, but I think it's a framework to use when we talk about justice. So the first thing is basic justice. And that basically means that our basic needs are met. So that we have the water for sanitation, we have the water for drinking, the water for washing, all those sorts of things have an acceptable quality and for all the time. Now, many Australians have that, but there are thousands of Australians who don't. So we haven't delivered basic water justice right here, right now in 2020 in Australia. The second type of injustice that we would focus in on is distributive justice. So that's basically a fair share for all. And this report documents in a very real way that there clearly is not a fair share for all. Some people are getting far, far more than their fair share. And because they're getting far more, it means some people, some communities are getting very little indeed, if any water. So we don't have distributive justice in all sorts of places in Australia. And then the third aspect of justice is procedural justice. And so procedural justice is about how decisions are made. So do the people who are affected by those decisions, do they have a respected voice? Do they have a seat around the table when those decisions are made? And as you well know, and as this report well documents, that is certainly not the case. The water sharing plans is well documented in here, of course, and it's documented in other literature, not just in these testimonies. You know, the water sharing plan for the Barwon-Darling in 2012, okay, that just was put in just before the Basin plan. The changes there were clearly was not agreed to by the people throughout the Northern Basin. And so the catalog goes on, and I'll leave you and the authors to talk it through. But I want to highlight a couple of things before I close. One is that there's a bunch of evidence in the scientific literature, peer-reviewed academic literature, that backs up many of these findings. So these are findings based on your work, but it's also supported in terms of the published literature. So it's worth highlighting that. The second thing I want to perhaps close with is just to highlight that you know, I agree with many of the findings and most of the recommendations. So and certainly the most important ones. So here's me on the outside, had nothing to do with this, nothing to do with the report, doing my own work in my own way, and to be connected here is, as I said, a real privilege, and I would support, not all I have to say, but that's for another time, the dialogue, but many of the findings and recommendations, and I think there's an outstanding piece of work. And my view, my closing statement is the only way, and I'm telling the people who invented this, but the only way we're going to change what's happening in terms of water injustice in Australia is if we change the hearts and minds of the Australian people. And so they know what's going on, because I can tell you this, the people who are making these decisions, they're not going to be influenced by your report. That's my opinion. I think they will be influenced by if people, all Australians, come together and say, this is not acceptable, we must change it. That's the only way we're going to bring about change. So thank you, Michelle, for the opportunity, and I look forward to listening to the co-authors and their take on the report, which, again, I want to stress is a very special report. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Quentin. We really appreciate your comments, and in fact, that's why you were invited. Mark Merritt recommended that I invite you because of your expertise, and we're very open to an honest assessment. And we look forward to further discussions with you and many others who are already established in the water justice field. So Gil, I would love now for you to be able to share for a few minutes some of your key, I guess, takeaways, the things that really struck you as one of the people who came out on the inquiry trip and co-wrote the report.
Thanks, Michelle. Hats off to Quentin. Thanks very much for your marvelous analysis of the situation that we faced, and of course the people on the rivers face today. I'm speaking from the central coast of New South Wales, specifically from Woy Woy, Big Lagoon, in the language of the Darkinjung Nation. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge that their land was never ceded to the colonizers. There have been many reports, government and otherwise, about the rivers, but I believe the citizens' inquiry was unique in the history of the Darling River Basin since colonization. It represents the views of the people, First Nations and others, living out there on the rivers. They have never been truly consulted by those who have made decisions that have brought the river to a crisis point. I am honored to help launch the report, which I believe is an account of a genocidal and ecocidal process that is a disgrace to Australia and which represents an existential threat to the future all Australians would hope to see, a just and sustainable future. These are strong words, but I recommend to the viewers, read the report, judge for yourselves whether they are justified on the basis of what we learned from the courageous and resilient people on the rivers of Western New South Wales. I would like to thank them for their generosity of time and energy in making the citizens' inquiry possible. I hope we have served them well. Many organizations on the river and in the basin, as well as throughout Eastern Australia, are fighting for a rejuvenated ecosystem and social justice for those on the river. It is also my hope that the report will assist them in the struggle against those who have brought the rivers and river communities to such a desperate state. Paraphrasing Joe Hill, don't mourn for the river, organize, demand change. Change in the governance and the management of the river. Demand an end to water theft, the system of water trading, illegal floodplain harvesting, corporate over-extraction of water, the building of further and unnecessary destructive dams. Demand that the crooks and corruptors who have done so much to harm the river be brought to justice. Demand that the voice of the people be heard and listened to and followed. Demand that First Nations knowledge and experience of dealing with ecosystems and biodiversity be incorporated in future river management. I want to express my thanks to those who have worked with us in the inquiry team and who traveled with us, advising us, preparing us for the journey, the incredible journey that we took, and those who recorded it as well. And thanks to all those who are with us tonight for your interest in the Darling River Basin.
Thank you so much, Gil. Really lovely. I'd like to now invite Gwen to share some thoughts on either her experiences along the river as we were collecting the information and talking to people, or her own insights into the recommendations or findings. You're still on mute, Gwen. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm calling in from Palawa country. Acknowledgement to elders past, present, and emerging. I just wanted to share with you some insights that I had from this report. For me, I think one of the great strengths of this report is that it's a narrative inquiry. It collected evidence, so it's very much an evidence-based inquiry, but it's one with a really light touch in that the facts themselves became evident through the shared and lived experience of those directly affected. So it's the participant's voice that really you can hear through this report. So we began our journey back in October of 2018 with the Australian People's Tribunal for Community and Nature's Rights convening in Brisbane, in the Brisbane Supreme Court, where we heard expert witness evidence about the state of the Barka, Darling River and Menindee lakes. But the panel concluded really that we had to go and see for ourselves and hear from those communities that are were directly affected. So we took to the road from Mildura to Walgett along the length of the river. What did we see? From my perspective, I saw a mighty iconic river that was once a trade route and paddle steamer highway, reduced to disconnected, rancid algae pools of water, undrinkable water trapped between town weirs. I saw the Barka, central to the Barkindji Nation creation stories and central to cultural life and cultural well-being, completely decimated. I also saw a living ecosystem, a river as an ecosystem, which is home to internationally listed wetlands and a diverse ecological communities of flora and fauna that were struggling to survive. I also witnessed whole river communities cut off from a once reliable water source and surviving on donated bottled water. So what were the community's concerns? What is it that we heard from the community as being their highlighted concerns? A major concern for the community was an over-extraction of too much water at the top end of the river. Other concerns were the insidious practice of floodplain harvesting that's endorsed by government. Some of the participants talked of alleged mismanagement and water theft, and a government with no appetite for following those particular issues up through the criminal law system. We also heard of the manipulation, if not the corruption, of the negotiation process for a fair water sharing plan. We heard of something that I hadn't appreciated until I heard from the participants about the commodification of our water. Our whole natural resource, our water resource, sold on the stock exchange. We also heard about water trading schemes that were substantially benefiting some of the industrial scale farmers along the river at the expense of family farms. We heard of the abject failure to consult with First Nations communities, and I think this is a key finding in the report, and the failure to allocate cultural flow in the apportioning of flows in the river. We also heard of water accounting practices that were unable to account for what we could only describe as missing water from the official statistics, government statistics. So what does all this mean? It's at the end of the day, we really could draw no other conclusion other than the fact that the current state of affairs is drastically inadequate, and that what we need is a community-led, solutions-based approach. For the communities, they put it as simply as allowing the river to flow. But some of the other solutions, specific solutions that were forwarded, was to reduce the extraction at the top end of the river, to look into how that might be regulated and enforced, to use a science-based approach. The community were asking for a science-based approach to manage our river's health. As well as that, to enforce the laws that are already there. The community know that there are laws in place, but that they're being averted. Some of the community participants were in fact calling for a royal commission into alleged water theft, corruption and mismanagement. Also changes to our governance structures and the management, how we go about managing our river, and to introduce transparent systems for water accounting and for information management and sharing of that public sharing of that information. The communities were asking for help to rebuild, and I would endorse Quentin's proposal too, and the community were asking for it too, is a Hearts and Minds campaign, and education of all Australians about the importance of this very important river system. So I would join with Gil and Michelle in just thanking the entire team that brought about the making of this report, everyone from the facilitating of the trip, from those recording, and the fantastic job of editing this report at the end, what was a monumental effort. And I just want to finally express my note of gratitude to those incredible, resilient communities and First Nations people who have withstood so much at this stage and continue to withstand hardship, to live in their community and their sense of place along those river communities, and who came forward to help the tribunal to give voice to a river system that is on its knees. So thank you, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Gwen. And Manny, would you like to share some of your thoughts on the process and the report?
Sure, thank you, Michelle, and thank you everyone for joining. I'm going to start by acknowledging I'm checking in from Gadigal country in Sydney, and I acknowledge elders past, present and emerging of this land, this country. I also wanted to take this moment to acknowledge river people everywhere in Australia and abroad, and I'm particularly drawn to reflect, as I've reflected many times during my involvement with this process through the People's Tribunal, at the both the impact on river people as not only the water and sources of life are disappearing in front of their eyes, but also the impact on culture and the impact on families and the impact on the continuity of culture that disappears, the impact on identity that is impacted when something which is so precious and so central to river people is affected in the way that we've seen the Darling River being affected in this particular instance. In terms of my experience of being involved in this report has been one of shock, one of anger, one of profound grief and sadness, but also one of profound joy, I suppose. And it's an odd word to throw in the mix there, but the joy which I'm speaking of was the personal impact of alongside with all the pain, suffering and grief and anger which we encountered in communities as we undertook this journey of traveling amongst river communities and hearing from communities firsthand. The joy was actually of the privilege of also getting to experience the profound resilience of people that live in those communities. It's something that will stay with me for a long time, because what we encountered was community members who cared and who were resilient and strong. And one of the things I heard time and time again was people saying the river will bounce back if we give her a chance. And that hope and that resilience is something which impacted me personally alongside with everything else. So thank you to all the brave and courageous community members, advocates, Indigenous elders, community members that actually came and participated in this process with us. We couldn't have done this without you, and your voice is very much what fuels the wisdom that's in this report. With respect to the report itself, I mean, I would strongly encourage everyone in this call to both read the report, especially the 19 findings and 50 recommendations, and also to pass on the word, because ultimately, until word is passed on from one person to another, some of the plight and some of the insights which have been developed over this process won't get out there. And so my strong request is that you both read the report and pass word on. As a lawyer, there was a number of findings and recommendations which were particularly insightful for me at a professional level. The first is, and this will come as no surprise to probably anybody on this call, is that there are already a number of legal protections under Australian law and policy which should have meant that this never got this bad and that this should have never happened. Now, for me as a lawyer, what that suggests is that there's some shortcomings in the current legislative environment, and there's been a number of findings and recommendations in the report to propose suggestive amendments to make the law stronger in that respect. However, also for me, it highlights the absolute essential importance of actually really spending the time as a society and as a community to really look into what's happened here and to really learn from what we can. And there's a number of avenues for doing that. First is a Royal Commission, and that's something we heard a lot about. And one of the recommendations made in this report, which I think is valuable, is around the proposed terms of reference of what a Royal Commission into the Murray-Darling Basin could look like. There's also a number of other recommendations which, as a human rights lawyer, I think are particularly pertinent, because so often law in this country is the lowest common denominator type approach, which is these are our bare minimum laws and that's all we have to do. However, in my belief is that when we make an intention, when we state an intention to comply with international standards, that we've got to take a highest common multiple approach and do our very best to meet those standards, whether we're obligated to or not. And there are findings in this report to suggest that the actions of governments, both state and federal, have led to breaches of international law, including some quite significant human rights conventions such as ICESCA, ICCPR, CEDAW and CROC.
We might have to wrap it up. We've only got another 15 minutes, so
I'll be very quick in my wrap up then.
Okay, that'd be great.
So in wrapping up, what I would do is like to take this opportunity to thank all of the team that I got to travel with and work on this report with, including my fellow panel members who are on this call, and everyone behind the scenes, James, Ryan, Megan, Gal, everyone that's put in such love and dedication and effort into this effort. None of this would have been possible without you. And also, as a final parting note, for me, I wanted to just reflect, I suppose, on the power of truth telling. It's fine for a specific group to go forward and investigate a matter. It's something entirely different when the experts, i.e. the people on country that live in relationship to the river every day, come and tell us the truth. And so as a final parting word, I wanted to thank them and wish them well. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Manny. And I do apologise for the short time that everyone has. But there are many good reasons for this as a first launch, only being the first of many webinar discussions that we can have about the report. And with more lead time, we'll be able to bring more people in. I'd like to now invite Ross Williams to share some thoughts. Ross was part of the 2018 tribunal that examined or listened to testimonies about the impact of large-scale agriculture and was our support checking the report from a First Nations point of view, even though Ross couldn't join us for the 2 weeks. Ross, did you want to unmute and just make some comments? Can you? Yeah,
I can do that. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you, Ross.
Hello, everybody. It's really important to give recognition to the traditional owners. Can you still hear me? Is it loud enough? Sorry?
Just a little bit louder, but yes, we can hear you.
You can? I'll put it up a little bit louder, see if that
Thanks,
works. I want to give recognition to the lands who I'm on at the moment, which is the Turrbal. They've given me the privilege and also allowed and given me the welcome to live on their country. My traditional country is the Bindal people from the Townsville, Mount Elliott, down to the Burdekin River in Queensland. I want to thank the panel members in particular and the people that have been on this journey. I think one of the things that I got out of this tribunal was the people's narrative, which was really important, but the people's voice. People had a voice and they felt like they needed to exercise that voice around the trauma. And they were able to do the storytelling in a very precise way, and those voices gave strength and spoke for the river, which can't speak for itself, and the waterways and the animals and the plants. And Indigenous people were very anguished, and I watched the anxiety and the anguish through a lot of the processes. And I think for me, seeing that anguish and anxiety creep in through mental health and well-being within the general society, and watching the different videos and so forth on it, for me was very stressful. I think we lose, when we lose the environment, the first thing that we start to lose is people's anxiety and hope for whether it's going to recover. And there's right in so many ways, is that there are so many threats through the environment, but people feel comfortable that it'll come back eventually if allowed and given the opportunity. But the thing that I guess worries me so much around the way our natural environment has been destroyed through water theft, corporate greed, the whole shooting match. It can be duplicated elsewhere across Australia. Even in Queensland, they're talking about the duplication of dams, and that in itself has very destructive nature about it. So, and the duplication of dams are not a healthy way of actually looking at how we exercise and look after water and share the current system. My concern also was around the level of suicide and self-harm as a part of this process. We don't see the real impact this is having on the community from a very, very blunt end. And we need to really understand that and let the community know in a broader context that not only is it environmental, it has a human impact. And that human impact can be quite horrific. And the traumas associated with it, as I watched people go through the anxiety of not only their own destruction as families, but also having to move away and trying to have an existence, but loving the place that they're on. They love the country, they love the place they live. It doesn't matter whether you're black or white or indifferent. The reality is people love where they are and they want to be there without the trauma of the eco side I get that we talk about. So I think from my point of view, that although everybody else spoke about the narrative around the environmental impact, the water theft, everything that built up towards this, my concern is that the real human impact will be long living beyond the next flood, when the waters will fill those rivers again. And then government will have or governments will say, look, we don't have a problem anymore. The rivers are full, they're flowing. Until the next drought comes along, we won't be able to fix it. And they won't see the need to put that into place. And I think a Royal Commission would be important to this, because we've got to put a broader lens over the whole landscape, what we are doing as human beings in the landscape. And I hope that, this, I know Quentin said, it's probably not, it's going to have limited effect, but I too believe that we can probably push it in a different way and push it in a different direction and provide some structural mechanisms by which we actually send this information out to the community, and saying just because the next flood comes along, it looks green, waters are full, that we can't still not put in place mechanisms and triggers so it doesn't happen again. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Ross. Just fantastic. So now I'd really very grateful to have Ryan, Jasper and Mark Merritt joining us. Mark Merritt came and met with me in the middle of 2018 to tell me all about the plight of the Menindee Lakes system. I'd heard about the Murray-Darling for decades, and as someone who loves country, was very worried, but it was Mark and Susie Peake and Sarah Moles who came and met with me and said, it would be terrific to include what's going on with the Menindee Lakes in the 2018 tribunal. So Mark and Ryan, just being aware that we only have 10 minutes left, if you would like to share just a couple of minutes from your own perspectives, particularly as you were such fantastic, not only champions of the issues, but you you know, helped us with everything on the logistics side for the 2-week trip, and did such a huge job with all of the film work and the work there. So Mark, if you would like to make some comments first, and then Ryan, that would be really terrific. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm pay my respects to the Dunghutti people who have not ceded their country to the colonial forces. I would also like to say, when I was first engaged with this issue, I saw a river flowing backward, and I couldn't believe that. And somebody said, well, that happens every day. They turn on the pumps. And I thought, that's not right. And, you know, when I looked into it, I realized that government policies, state and federal, are actually killing Australian people. These are people that I can drive to, like, who live in outback New South Wales. It's not overseas, it's not in the Middle East. These are our people who are being killed by government policy, literally. And it really makes you angry. And so, you know, we created a website called The Vanishing River, where we just put up some interviews from people out west. When we started, the people said, why talk to us? Nobody listens to us, but they're listening now. And the whole world is listening now. And so thank you for everybody in the West who's speaking up. And I know that Murray Butcher and Brendan Adams and Barry Stone and all the beautiful people in Western New South Wales and all the language groups out there are watching, and they know that people are listening. So we have to keep talking. We have to take this report to the highest place and get everybody in Australia to be aware of it. We want to print them, print more and more of them, get them in every school, every library in this country, because this is a problem that's not going to go away. We have to sort it out. That's just about all I have to say. Thank you.
Fantastic as usual, Mark. Thank you so much. And Ryan, would you like to say g'day and tell us a bit about where you're up to with the film? And every time I see Ryan, I almost laugh out loud about how he had to put up with me for 2 weeks straight, microphones on me, grab me when I was stressed, upset. So I'm really glad that you can be here too, Ryan. Anyway, over to you, Dom.
Thanks, Michelle. Thank you. No worries. Pleasure. Can you hear me okay? Excellent. Yeah, so thanks, Mark, and all the rest of the panel members for speaking tonight and inviting me to speak. Thank you, Michelle. Well, what can I say? I mean, what an honor it was for us to come out and record the Citizens Inquiry through 8 towns over 1,500 kilometres, more than 110 testimonies from different people from all walks of life across the whole region of the Darling, right from northern Victoria to northern New South Wales. So I guess, you know, I'm a humble filmmaker. So when I heard about this issue, it was Mark Merritt, who has kind of been on the dog and bone to me. I can't tell you how many times, telling me how important and how massive this is. So I give my thanks to you, Mark, for your hard work in pursuing it. So when I heard about the Citizens Inquiry last year, I thought, this is an event that needs to be recorded. This is history in the making. So we pulled together a crew and came out and filmed it. And part of it is all the videos you see on the website. And the other part of it is all of the footage we shot behind the scenes of all the challenges, the ups and downs that the panel went through in pulling together that event and interviewing all those people and going through such an emotional roller coaster that they experienced, which from my perspective, I find really interesting because it shows you how deep and how impactful and on the scale and severity of this issue. So the film now moving forward, we are continuing to follow the groundswells of movement on the ground amidst activists fighting for the justice of the Darling, of the Barka. Right now, there's all sorts of things happening out west. There's a lot of energy, a lot of momentum. It is growing in people's awareness across the country. So moving forward, we are wanting to continue the documentary from the inquiry that we recorded to then the impact that's having on people on the ground and how it's inspiring them, lifting them up, giving them hope, and then following the actions that then are being carried out from there to try and create change, to try and restore their dying darling. So you can follow us on social media at The Voice of the Barka, which I can share in the chat below after my talk.
Yes, please
at the end of the event. And yeah, please support us. And if you would like to see this film come to fruition, please reach out and contact me. We have a lot of footage. We have all the access secured. We have, yeah, it's all there. It's just kind of getting some financial support behind us so we can produce it to the scale it needs to be produced to reach lots of people and ultimately raise more awareness and promote the incredible findings and recommendations that have been put forward through the Citizens Inquiry. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
And for us, even on the panel, this is not the end. This is just the beginning of helping to promote the stories and get the word out there. So now that we've got the dang thing out and can be back on our feet helping in other ways, I would really, really urge people to get in touch with Ryan. And if you've got any contacts with funders and others, please do get in touch. I think the film is critically important for the story of one of the heartlands of Australia. I want to thank everybody for being here and sharing with us and also for listening. And I do apologize, we've only got about 3 minutes left, but if anyone has a burning question, if you'd like to pop it in the chat or just erupt in, take your mute off. We've only really got a couple of minutes, and the reason for that is we finished the report last week after many months of trying to be finished, and it just kept going on and on. It was so big. And it just emerged before I'm in the middle of a 3-day conference with an evening event, an international webinar about to start in 3 minutes. So that's why it's a bit squishy tonight, but we will be doing much more. So, but has anyone got any questions?
Hi, Michelle. My name's
Hi.
I'm a PhD student down in Melbourne, focusing on the issue of water theft throughout the Murray-Darling Basin. I haven't had the opportunity to go through the report in depth yet. I've had a bit of a quick read. However, it looks really insightful and I'm looking forward to reading it. I just had a quick question. In the testimonies that, that the tribunal did, how big was the issue of water theft along the Darling River?
Constant. I think the short answer is constant. Everyone was concerned about over extraction of water through large scale irrigation. The commodification of water itself was seen as theft. This notion that you could privatize and sell off water and separate it from land, but definitely people doing floodplain harvesting, a concept that many city goers like myself had barely heard of. People see that as theft because they're basically building banks and building structures that channel water for their own purposes away from the river system itself. Gwyn might have some other words on the water theft, but absolutely constant. Everyone talked about it. Everyone was aware of it. And it was a source of great despair that not only were they suffering, but it was being at the hands of what many people perceived as absolute greed and lack of care for others.
Yeah, I definitely look forward to going through the report. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really depressing, but it might give you a kickstart in finding some other sources for your material. So Ben's just saying she has to go. She's one of our guest speakers in 1 minute. So, but that's a great question, Alex. Thank you so much. There's also a lovely woman on here that's too shy to talk, Maria. If you look in the chat box, Maria's put in a number of comments and links. Maria was one of the people who spoke with us from the lower parts of the Barka, and her testimony can be found on video on the website. So look, I think we might close now. I do wish we had more time, but thank you so much to everybody who could join us. And again, my extreme thanks to everybody who's along the Barka Darling who came out despite their exhaustion personally and about the issues themselves, sharing with us. And we hope that the report is of some use to the local people. That's our main purpose, that local people have it under their arm at an opportunity whenever it arises to use it, to show it to other people, because at least it's a document that is for them and not just another government document that's for the government, so, or corporate interests. So without any other urgent issues, I might just say thank you so much. And exactly as it's been said tonight, please do share it where you can. We will be developing a comprehensive communications plan. We've got some initial ideas, but this is not the end of anything. It's the beginning now that it's in written form. So thank you so much, everybody. Hey?
Save the chat. Save the chat.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if anyone wants to get in touch, email us at tribunal@earthlaws.org.au. We're easy to find, or just look for Ayla. Thank you, lovely people. Take care.